So let's just then turn our attention to America and the taper tantrum and the Fed raising rates. What's your view on that? Through your economic analysis, and just let me give you a bit of context to speak into. We were at a dinner together with the ECB, Vice Chair of the ECB.
Trying to bore us all senseless, and he succeeded.
No, he just succeeded. He was brilliant. And he ran the clock down. And then suddenly his English started to fail when he got a complicated question. I don't know if you saw that. And also we were there with the Vice President, one of them of the Fed.
Yeah,
New York Fed. And when you made the point to her, look, the private debt in the US is a problem, and once you raise rates, you're gonna have a shock. Can you just talk? And she totally dismissed that. She just didn't see your theory. Can you just talk me through that and why there will be a problem in the US when the Fed does decide to?
Well, it comes back to the whole issue, which distinguishes my approach to economics and the post-Keynesian approach in general from what the mainstream, which we call neoclassical, believes, and that is they don't see private debt or change in private debt as having any particular macroeconomic impact. They can see it having a crunch like we had recently when they say people got panicked about the level of the debt and tried to reduce it, and because we happen to have low inflation, then you hit the zero level, what they call zero lower bound, where you can't drive reserve rates any lower. They're saying given that the decline in spending by debtors who are trying to reduce their debt wasn't counteracted by savers increasing their spending as they had as the debtors repaid the money they owed to the savers. That's the analysis they make. Now they think once you get through a crisis like this, then you get above the point where that zero lower bound is a problem, and debt you can forget about it again. And I have in my Minsky software package, I've built their model of what lending is like, which is, Ross lends to Steve. So Ross's spending power goes down, Steve's goes up, then Steve repays Ross. So Steve's spending power goes down, Ross's goes up. Macroeconomically, not much effect, unless you're profligate, but I'm probably more profligate than you are. So, it's minor at the fringes impact of changes in the level of debt. What I argue is that when I borrow money, I don't borrow from Ross, my mate Ross. I borrow from the Bank of Megan, who credits my account with extra money, not affecting yours, and credits her book and saying I've got an additional asset. So the assets and the liabilities rise, whereas in lending between you and me, the bank's liability to you goes down, my liability goes up. It's one cancels out the other. Here you create more money, you spend that money into the economy. So when you've got a rising level of debt, you've got rising demand as well. Now, if you then have any situation which causes people to reduce their debt, that's reducing the amount of money in the economy and taking demand out of the economy at the same time. So when they try to put rates up, ignoring all this dynamic, when they put rates up, people who are on the borderline, again, you think I've got to pay my debt down, so they start reducing the debt, rather than that just meaning, well, the person in debt reduces their spending, therefore the saver has more money to spend, so it doesn't matter. What happens is the person who reduces their spending pays the bank debt down, bank assets fall, bank liabilities fall, which is what money predominantly is, less economic activity, the economy slumps.
But they're nowhere near, and it is a complicated theory. And it does take. You've given a load of people an ice cream headache out there, trying to get their head around that.
Sorry,
but if that is,
I'm not really.
But people do need to grapple with that and understand it,
because
and replay that bit of tape for a fair bit of time to really understand how the economy works. But the Fed and the people within it don't seem to be anywhere near that thinking.
The best bank on that front, and this is going to be an intriguing experience for them for the next 5 years, is the Bank of England.
Why?
It's hard to answer that question. I think there's a couple of reasons. Individuals, I think there's some people inside the Bank of England, I won't mention names, but good people, who have been sceptical about the crisis, going through the crisis, thinking, we didn't see that coming, there's got to be something wrong with our models if we didn't see this coming. And secondly, the bank has now developed a new research tack, which they're calling One Bank, where they're trying to take guidance from all sorts of approaches to analysing a complex system, not just what economic theory tells it to do. So, and also the Bank of England came up with a wonderful document called Money Creation in the Modern Economy. This is back at the beginning of last year. And they're saying, basically almost wrote a note to all the American neoclassicals, with Paul Krugman being the main recipient, saying, listen guys, bank lending creates money. Whereas the conventional think is, and the American central bank is dominated by very, very limited perspective, neoclassical drag racing type personalities, don't see what's happening either side of them, saying, no, it doesn't create money, it just reallocates. It's a intermediary. Now that term has almost been banished from the Bank of England. They know that private borrowing creates money. They're fairly aware that it also creates additional demand. So they're aware of the dynamics going on here. The Fed, as you saw from seeing Christine on that occasion, just doesn't even get the picture. So if they put rates up, then they're likely to find the economy declines very rapidly. But of course they're now finding the economy is already declining.
Do you find that younger economists working at the Bank of England, because I mean, one of the problems of the Bank of England surely is Mark Carney's there. He left Canada in a private debt hole. Private debt at the moment in Canada is absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Does he see it? Is he a former banker? And I'm not being conspiratorial, but is he a former banker? So he doesn't, want to sound the alarm because ultimately private banks make make profit out of selling debt. How do younger economists actually see it more clearly?
I think younger economists definitely do. They've got more. Once you're locked into a mental framework, it's very, very hard for anybody to shift. I'd have to say the same thing about myself on that front. Just that my framework is more reliable than most people's. But once you've got a way of thinking about the world, you tend not to see things which contradict that. And Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, was a wonderful section that a colleague sent to me, saying that he talked about theory-induced blindness. And he said if you have a theory that to you explains the world, and then you get some data which strongly contradicts that way of seeing the world, rather than saying, oh, my view must be wrong, you almost don't see. You've got a blind spot for that thing which contradicts you. So if you've been established in the industry for a long, long time, and you've got something like the American system, which is incredibly hierarchical in terms of the ranking of mainstream economists versus the rest, you don't see it. You won't even look at the data. Whereas something in England, and I think this comes down partly, I think, to the long history of being a truly liberal nation. One thing I've got to give England great credit for.
Don't worry, mate, that's on its way out.
Well, no, yeah, possibly, but it's certainly, the fact that you hosted Karl Marx without chucking him out of the country, as the French and the Prussians did beforehand, things like that. There's a tradition of letting other views be expressed here, and a tradition of debate, which certainly is better than America.
Yes.
Because that conformism in America, if anybody even suggests they might have seen a cover of a book by Marx, they must be a con.
Terrorist.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, probably an Islamic one too. Islamic terrorist. Yeah. An anti-God Islamic terrorist. Yeah. So this paranoia in America means that limits thinking. England tends to be more relaxed about these things and more open to it. That's probably part of the reason why. As for Carney, I don't know. I can't say. But I can certainly say that from the lower echelons to the upper echelons of the bank, there's more openness to other ways of looking at it.
The Bank of England.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful then? Because are people who've thought differently about economics? Are you hopeful about some common sense or real world thinking?
It's difficult because it's not just the economists who are wrong here. The public as well has got the same mindset, because it's so easy to say, the government should behave like a household. If the government saves money, then I can save money type thinking. And that's why I've started developing that analogy of draw a rectangle.
And just to be clear, the government is running the budget as you would a household budget.
Yeah.
The people then of the country think that that's actually how you should do things, because that's how they run their own budgets, and it's very reductionist, simplistic way.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the problem, because
and the press further peddle that because they don't want to do the hard yards of actually explaining.
Again, it's again like driving a car. I mean, you and the thing is, at least we've all seen a car get into a skid.
Yeah.
Okay, we all know we should really turn the wheel to the left when we want to go right in a skid. But the visceral stuff is so hard to resist. And I'm talking from experience, okay? Didn't ride the car. I was so lucky. I just stopped before the telegraph pole. But I know I did the wrong thing, even though I knew what was necessary to do. You've got to actually be in a driver training school where you do that and you see what happens, and then you say, okay, I'm going to turn it. And then I'm controlling a complex system. I know what I'm doing. That's difficult for the politicians. It's very difficult for the economists because of the mindset they've got. It's equally difficult for the public.
But the media are...
Media play a major role, but I mean, again, you don't need a Murdoch conspiracy to explain that. When you find that in the other newspapers as well. It is just because thinking about a complex system is challenging, and most of us take a simple analogy and run with that, and the simple analogy in this case supports the argument for austerity. It's very, very hard to get the public to the stage and say, oh, we understand this now. It's a complex system. Sometimes you've got to do the opposite of what looks like the direct effect. No, I think the only way you're going to learn is through hard pain, and that's really what that seems to be humanity in general. We've only learnt we've done the wrong thing after we've done it a hell of a long time, and it's failed to have the impact that we were told it would have in the first place.